June 13, 2025, 2 a.m. The world woke up to a sudden, deafening roar over the skies of Tehran. More than 150 Israeli fighter jets had crossed into Iranian airspace. The mission was called Operation Rising Lion.
Launched Operation Rising Lion.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion,
A mission that Israel claimed would neutralize Iran's nuclear threat forever. But as the days passed and the bombs fell, it became harder to shake the feeling that this was not just a war, but a carefully staged performance, designed as much for television and politics as it was for any battlefield. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to uncover the full story of this extraordinary conflict, what really happened, why it started, and whether the Iran-Israel war was ever meant to be won. It all began in the early hours of that June morning. More than 150 Israeli fighter jets launched without warning. Their targets, over 80-plus sites spread across Iran, missile factories, air defense headquarters, key infrastructure, and the most controversial targets of all, Iran's nuclear research facilities. The skies of Tehran and Isfahan were lit up by explosions. Entire buildings collapsed in seconds. Iran's air defenses scrambled, but the scale and speed of the attack left them reeling. Among those killed were not only soldiers but also senior military commanders and several prominent nuclear scientists, people who had spent years developing Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities. Israel justified the attack as preemptive self-defense. Prime Minister Netanyahu went on air declaring that Iran was weeks away from producing a nuclear weapon. Yet many observers noted that there was no immediate Iranian provocation that could explain this sudden escalation. But Iran would not remain silent. By that same evening, Iran launched a massive counterattack. More than 200 ballistic missiles and kamikaze drones rained down on Israeli territory. Tel Aviv, Haifa, and several military bases came under fire, though Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system managed to intercept most of the incoming weapons. Some broke through, exploding in residential neighborhoods and sparking panic. In a single day, both nations had been thrust into their largest direct confrontation in decades. The region braced itself for an even more catastrophic escalation. The fighting continued for 12 long days. Each night, new barrages of missiles lit up the sky. Iran vowed to make Israel pay a heavy price for its aggression. Israel threatened to flatten any site used to produce nuclear materials. And just when it seemed the conflict could not get worse, the United States entered the fray. On June 15, President Donald Trump delivered a televised address. He announced that America could not allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons, and that the time had come to act decisively. After some days, American B-2 stealth bombers lifted off from Missouri, flying more than 37 hours non-stop across the world. Their target, Iran's three most critical nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. These sites had been built deep underground, protected by layers of rock and reinforced concrete. To destroy them, the U.S. used the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the most powerful non-nuclear bomb ever deployed in combat. From the air, the bombs looked like meteors falling to Earth. When they struck, the explosions sent shockwaves miles in every direction. President Trump appeared on American TV, calling the strikes a spectacular success. He claimed Iran's nuclear ambitions had been completely erased. But almost immediately, intelligence experts questioned this narrative. Satellite images showed that while the buildings above ground were devastated, Iran's enriched uranium and centrifuges had already been moved out days earlier. The supposed total destruction had achieved very little in reality. Over those 12 days, warnings flew back and forth like missiles themselves. Iran threatened to strike American bases in the Gulf and beyond. Israel promised even harsher retaliation if any more rockets were fired. President Trump issued stark ultimatums, declaring, if Iran continues its aggression, there will be consequences like nothing the world has ever seen. And yet, behind the fury of the public statements, diplomatic channels were wide open. Negotiators in Oman and Qatar worked frantically to de-escalate. On June 19, Iran made one last dramatic move. 19 missiles were fired at the Air Base in Qatar, the largest American base in the Middle East. But here too, Iran sent advance warning to avoid heavy casualties. Most of the missiles either missed or caused only minor damage. In response, President Trump surprised everyone by stepping back from the brink. He announced he didn't want more war, declaring, "America has shown its strength. Now it is time for peace." And just like that, the fighting stopped. On June 25th, a complete ceasefire was declared. No peace treaty, no formal resolution, just an abrupt end to 12 days of chaos. The world was left wondering, what was this war really about? Israel claimed it was necessary to neutralize Iran's nuclear threat, yet multiple reports confirmed Iran had no actual nuclear bombs. Their uranium enrichment, while advanced, had not crossed the line into weaponization. Then there was the story of the nuclear deal, the agreement brokered under President Obama in 2015, which had limited Iran's enrichment to peaceful levels and allowed international inspectors to monitor their sites. But in 2018, Donald Trump tore up that deal, calling it defective without offering any clear alternative. Sanctions were reimposed, Iran resumed enrichment, and 3 years later, that same enrichment became the excuse for a war. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's corruption trials were derailing his political career. The hearings had finally begun in earnest, and Israeli media was consumed with allegations of bribery and fraud. But the moment war broke out, everything changed. Trials were postponed indefinitely. Public support rallied around the prime minister. Critics accused Netanyahu of starting a war to save himself from prison. And then there was Trump. Throughout the conflict, he repeatedly suggested he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Peace Prize.
Not for avoiding the war, but for ending it after starting it. He invoked the prize so often that it became a punchline in the press. In the end, what did 12 days of airstrikes accomplish? Hundreds of civilians lost their lives. Thousands more were displaced. Billions in damage were inflicted across Iran and Israel, and yet, Iran's nuclear program was only slightly delayed, not dismantled. It is hard to avoid the conclusion that this was not just a war, it was a war show, a spectacle to distract from corruption cases, to feed political egos, and to produce headlines that could be read back home as victories, for the people caught beneath the bombs. However, there was nothing theatrical about it, just terror, loss, and the bitter knowledge that sometimes, wars are not fought for security or justice, but for power. If you found this story important, please share it. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next investigation into how politics can manufacture wars. And remember, always question the narratives you are given. Thank you for watching.